Well, now it's time for us to continue with analyzing the Queen's Gambit. In earlier episodes we have seen what happens after White's third move e4, an aggressive move which gave White the center simultaneously as it opened up for the White bishop to threaten the c4 pawn.
This move's weakness is that it leaves White a bit too vulnerable. The center is simply not stable enough for White to have such advanced pawns. That is why White's e3 in this position has become a well-known and well-liked continuation.
White does now threaten the c4 pawn, and Black can't be too careful when it comes to its next move. Previously, Black has been able to choose between 4 different continuations: b5, knight to c6, knight to f6 and e5. After e3, only e5 and knight to f6 are recommended.
It's quite easy to understand why knight to c6 doesn't work. This since the move doesn't attack White. In our previous variations, when White played e4, knight to c6 threatened the d4 pawn. Now it only blocks Black from being able to advance with the c pawn in the future. A very important possibility for Black. Furthermore, b5 is a very interesting option and probably the first move one thinks of in this position, the first time one sees it. But the move falls short after White's a4 followed by c6 and a takes on b5, because if Black now would recapture on b5, Black loses material after queen to f3. Black's best option would be to sacrifice the knight by playing knight to c6, which would be followed by queen takes on c6 check and bishop to d7.
No, this is not a good continuation for Black. So what happens after knight to f6? Even though this move no longer threatens a pawn like it did after White's e4, it is a good move since it's so elementary. The position has to get quite twisted around for Black, not needing to develop his knight by placing it on f6.
Another option is Black's e5. White can take the pawn without having to be afraid of losing material, but Black will get an advantage if White does so, because after d takes on e5, Black plays knight to c6, and this is followed by White protecting his own threatened pawn by playing f4.
Now follows White's example. Black plays bishop to e6, protecting the c4 pawn, and this is followed by knight to f3, castle queenside, bishop to d2 and f6. This last move is very important since it breaks White's central pawns. If Black would exchange on f6, the e3 pawn suddenly becomes bare for attack along the e file.
Black has an advantage in this position, so naturally White should avoid this continuation. So instead of capturing on e5, White should capture with the bishop on c4. And Black answers by exchanging pawns on d4. This is followed by knight to f6, knight to f3, bishop d6, castle kingside, knight to c3 and knight to c6.
Now Black does in this position have a very good chance of equalizing because of the rather weak d4 pawn. Furthermore, Black has a stable position from which it's easy to play. But with this, we end this week's episode of The Opening Score. We are of course back again next week, so see you then.